Russell Wilson is now a New York Giant. Stefon Diggs is a New England Patriot. Yeah, yesterday was pretty wild for NFL news. And that news directly impacts the NFL draft. So join me in this video as I provide a new NFL top 10 mock draft. We're going to go from picks 1 through 10 to analyze how Diggs to the Pats and especially Russell Wilson to the G-Men impacts the early portion of the NFL draft this year. If that sounds good and you want more mock drafts on the Bottom Line View, Gronk, spike the like button. In fact, if we get 100 Gronk spikes on this video, I'll come out with a fresh 2-round mock draft, something I have not done yet this offseason. Also, let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree with my selections for each team. These are my predictions for the top 10 picks in the NFL draft. Let's begin with the first pick in the 2025 NFL draft. I believe it's a lock. That's right. Cam Ward, the quarterback from the U, will become the franchise quarterback of the Tennessee Titans. The Titans have made it clear. They have not made a move in free agency at quarterback of any substance. If you think Tim Boyle changes that, well, you got another thing coming, pal. Cam Ward is going to be their quarterback. Cam Ward is going to be their franchise guy, and I think this is the correct selection. They could not dive into next season with Will Levis. I think going after a name like Sam Darnold for as much money as you'd have to spend on that player was maybe a little bit too risky with where their franchise was at. And I would also say that Cam Ward provides the most upside out of the top quarterbacks in this class. He's a playmaker on and off the field. I love his attitude. I love his composure. I love his confidence. I think that he has a big arm and can make all the throws inside or outside the pocket. And he does have, I think, a more gifted skill set than a lot of people are talking about. He certainly has that creativity that a lot of the top quarterbacks in the NFL right now possess. So I think Cam Ward could be the guy for Tennessee for years to come. He's drawing comparisons to a once great Tennessee Titan, rest in peace, to Steve Air McNair. This could be the next one. Cam Ward to the Titans. Another potential franchise quarterback to the AFC. Now, with the second pick in the 2025 NFL draft, this is where the Russell Wilson news has a direct impact. And on my latest mock draft, I did actually decide to go this direction, and I'm glad that I did, because I think this is increasingly likely after the Russell Wilson news, and we'll explain why. At number 2, I have Shedeur Sanders to the Cleveland Browns. And the reason I believe that, it's really two in combination here, two pieces of information. First, we have the Cleveland Browns being in a situation that is really tough on a franchise. They're paying a ton of guaranteed money, a massive contract to a quarterback that's not only injured, but also sucks, okay? And not only does he suck, nobody likes him. So it's the ultimate combination of a quarterback that you want to get rid of ASAP. But it's also a quarterback that doesn't afford you the luxury, because he's being paid so much money, to go out there and trade for somebody, or to go out there and sign a Sam Darnold or somebody like that, right? They are tied. Their hands are tied behind their back to make this selection at number 2 overall increasingly likely to be a young quarterback. Because the ultimate way to still come out on top, despite paying so much money to a quarterback, is to have a cheap alternative, right? And a cheap alternative would be Shedeur Sanders. A quarterback that could handle a fiasco like Cleveland, right? A confident individual off the field that could handle a fiasco, could handle that pressure, could handle being a Browns quarterback in terms of they have not had a guy since the 80s and Bernie Kosar that was any sort of consistent. Now, they messed that thing up themselves because they moved on from Baker potentially a little bit too fast. But I look at Sanders, and you can also draw some comparisons to some of the quarterbacks that Kevin Stefanski has preferred throughout his career, like Kirk Cousins, who actually has been a fairly common comp for Shedeur Sanders. I know that Cousins is kind of the cheap comp for every pocket passer to enter the NFL over the last 6 years, but I feel like Sanders does possess the IQ, the accuracy, the patience, and the timing, and also the toughness in the pocket to be very good under Stefanski. Stefanski has really been able to get the most out of a lot of quarterbacks, including old, off-the-couch Joe Flacco, right? Famous Jameis last year in certain games. And then you look at Baker Mayfield at times. You look at really the only quarterback he has not gotten a lot out of is Deshaun Watson, who's broken down, lacking confidence, and also distracted. So there's a lot going on with Cleveland. They need a quarterback that can be measured, a personality that can calm them, and I feel can also provide a spark of hope. And so there's no hope there. And I don't think Myles Garrett signs to be on this team without the hope of a young quarterback or the hope of an established franchise quarterback. They didn't sign Russell Wilson. He ends up going to the Giants, and Russ did work out for Cleveland, right? They didn't re-sign Jameis Winston. They didn't go after Aaron Rodgers, or at least they haven't yet, right? There's no indication that they will. They didn't go after Sam Darnold. There's really nothing to indicate that they're in the veteran quarterback market outside of trading for a backup. Kenny Pickett is not a starter. I don't think anybody thinks Kenny Pickett is a starter. He's a fine backup, right? Fine backup. We'll do fine as a backup, but he's not a franchise quarterback. He's not a starter. So for me, it just makes too much sense. And then you also throw in the Shurmur connection, the Colorado offensive coordinator from last season under Deion Sanders, right, in that coaching staff, the Shurmur connection to Sanders and Stefanski. So there's common ties in terms of the offense that might be ran in Cleveland that could support Sanders. So I think what the Browns are looking for is a quarterback with the off-the-field toughness, the on-the-field toughness, and the accuracy and IQ to run the Stefanski offense. I think Shedeur does have all those aspects, even if you don't think he is this incredible Josh Allen-like athlete. Okay, so at number 2, Shedeur Sanders to the Browns, because the Giants kind of played the hand of stating that we think Sanders might be going at number 2. Because at number 3 now, they're going to pivot to Travis Hunter, the former teammate of Shedeur Sanders. So breaking down everything, it feels like Russell Wilson was signed because this team is under desperation. This franchise needs to win, right? They need to win. And Jameis Winston, as much as I love him, and I might make an argument that Jameis might be a more capable drop-back passer than Russell Wilson at this point in his career, I don't think any franchise with their lives on the line, with their jobs on the line, like Brian Daboll and Joe Shane, right? Those guys are not going to make, Jameis their guy. The quarterback that basically said, can I be relieved of pick sixes? You know what I'm saying? So I just don't think any franchise was going to entrust Jameis in a pure starting role because of his history of being a very risky quarterback, as much as we all love Jameis and want to see him play. So Russell Wilson was the pickup, and you could say whatever you want about Russell Wilson, but 2 things are real about Russell Wilson, right? 1, he wins more than he loses. Even over the last few years, the last 2 seasons combined, he has a 500 record. And he just led an NFL team with a good defense and a couple targets to throw to the playoffs. And I think the Giants can look at themselves and say, we've got some very similar things about our team. We fixed our secondary with Javon Holland and Paulson Adebo. We have a really good pass rush, Dexter Lawrence and Brian Burns led. We've got an offensive line that might actually be a little bit better than the one in Pittsburgh, especially considering we have a real left tackle, Andrew Thomas, which Russ has always thrived when he has a real blindside protector because he likes to escape towards his right. And then we've got a real wide receiver one in Malik Neighbors, even potentially better than George Pickens. And we've actually got more complementary weapons like Tyrone Tracy in the backfield. We've got Wan'Dale Robinson as a short little slot shifty threat. And then we also have a really good deep threat in Darius Slayton and an offensive coach in Brian Daboll. So I feel like Russ looks at it as he can get the most out of me, Brian Daboll, as he did with Daniel Jones. I think Brian Daboll looks at Russ saying he's got a really good touchdown to interception ratio. If you look at his last 2 seasons, a lot of touchdowns, not a lot of interceptions. Despite the high sack percentage, the holding onto the ball, the lack of vision over the middle of the field, Russ does give them a chance to win and does throw more touchdowns and does protect the ball. And he's a lot of the polar opposite of Daniel Jones. And in terms of protecting the ball, he's much better at that than Jameis Winston, right? Jameis might be better at drop back pass, but Russ is better at the explosion, right? He's better at the big play. So I look at this and I'm like, okay, so now that they signed Russ and they have Jameis, there's no way, shape, or form that they're attacking quarterback at number 3. That must mean that they're rather sold that Shedeur is going number 2, which is kind of my inclination, right? Or they just didn't like Shedeur Sanders. They didn't want to pick him. Because there's no way you're having already the most memeable quarterback room in football and maybe the history of football with Russell Dangerous, Mr. Unlimited Wilson, and Mr. Aura himself, Jameis Winston. You weren't going to bring in a rookie, even Shedeur Sanders, and combining the Sanders name with Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston would be too much for the internet to handle. So I just don't see how any organization would put themselves through that extravaganza, that circus. I mean, that would be ridiculous. So it's not a quarterback here. It's going to be Travis Hunter because the Giants, the biggest need on their roster still remains corner. So if they want to play Travis Hunter at corner to complement Paulson Adebo, that would make a lot of sense, and it would make their defense even more dominant. At the same time, they've got a creative offensive mind in Brian Daboll that could utilize him in a limited capacity, or they could just have him as the number 2 receiver to Malik Neighbors. So either way, he could be a number 2 corner, a number 2 receiver for this team. You could slowly involve him as the great athlete that he is, and I'm slowly starting to believe that this guy could be a really special receiver. So Travis Hunter, either way, is going to be a stud, and I think the Giants, they were made. New York was made for this type of player, for this type of spotlight. I mean, imagine this is the type of player that if you're not going to get a quarterback, he could also save your franchise. He could also save your coach because he's that exciting, right? He's that exciting, similar to an Odell Beckham or a Saquon Barkley. So at number 3, Travis Hunter to the Giants. At number 4, this is where the Patriots could decide to trade back and get a haul for Abdul Carter, maybe a pass rushing needy team like potentially the Panthers or the Falcons or, some team that really needs a pass rusher could trade up here with the Patriots if the Patriots decide that they want to trade back and pick a receiver or a tackle. That's entirely possible. But at number 4, I'm just going to stick and pick, and I'm going to say that they take Abdul Carter. I just think when you can take a potential generational player or probably the best player at his position in this draft, you've got to pick that player. Especially because New England, as much as they did improve on defense, they did add Harold Landry to the edge. Harold Landry is a little bit past his prime, and they do not have a legitimate game-wrecking pass rusher from the edge. And Abdul Carter played off-ball linebacker and edge. So this is almost a dream selection for Mike Vrabel, a player that played both off-ball linebacker and the edge position for New England in his days in New England. So putting Abdul Carter in this Patriots defense would make them absolutely one of the most dominant and destructive units in football. I just don't see how they pass this guy up. Even if the Panthers offer a 2nd round pick to move up 4 spots, I think it's unlikely that Mike Vrabel passes on the best pass rusher and the potential next Micah Parsons. It just would not make a lot of sense to me. So at number 4, Abdul Carter to the Patriots. This is pretty much because we know how the top 3 are going to go. I think the Patriots would prefer Travis Hunter at this spot. I do believe he would be their top-ranked receiver, and I do think they would want Travis Hunter out of anybody in the draft, in my opinion. But because he's likely to go number 3, now that Shedeur is likely to go number 2, I think Carter lands in New England. At number 5, we're just going to stay with Mason Graham here. This is the pick that just makes the most sense. And as I brought up before, we try to read what's going on with general manager speak, we try to read, the needs. And I feel like I'm very good at reading needs in the NFL because that's one thing that I do, I think, better than most. And Mason Graham feels like the perfect fit for the former Ram employee, right? The former scout with Los Angeles, who just saw this Rams team turn around their defense through multiple great selections in their front seven. He was a part of a Rams organization that had Aaron Donald and really did win their Super Bowl thanks to additions like Von Miller that aided Aaron Donald and Leonard Floyd to a Super Bowl, right? So you look at the Rams' success and you try to take that and you try to piece that together with what Jacksonville's going to want to do. And they're going to want a quick, disruptive Mason Graham, a guy that might not fit everybody's prototypical nose or defensive tackle type, but he does seem to fit the prototype of a Ram defensive tackle in that he's very quick and his penetration is just disruptive. That is Aaron Donald. That is Fisk, who they drafted last year. Right, so Mason Graham is the best defensive tackle prospect. His tape pops in terms of disruption. He makes a lot of sense for Jacksonville, who their biggest need is defensive tackle, arguably on their entire roster. They got needs at offensive line, maybe wide receiver 2, maybe also corner. But I think out of all those needs, making your pass rush go from, it's decent to, okay, we've got something now. Mason Graham added to Trayvon Walker and added to Josh Hines Allen. That's pretty fun, in my opinion. At number 6, we're going to pivot at number 6. We've recently had T-Mac go to the Raiders multiple times. I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to go in the most common approach, which is to pick Ashton Jeanty. And I'm starting to turn this way just because, when you talk about Pete Carroll, one of the big things that comes out of your mouth is the ability to run the ball, be physical, right? Be able to control pace of play. And a great running game does allow you to do that. I think also Chip Kelly would get the most out of an Ashton Jeanty type of athlete, runner, and receiver. He can do everything well. He's a power back that's explosive, right? He breaks a ton of tackles. He's a guy that can energize an offense and bring a real attitude to the Raiders that needs to return. So as much as I think they should look at receiver more than running back, and maybe even corner, I just don't know if there's a corner that they would prefer in this spot. Will Johnson is their type, in my opinion, like Pete Carroll's big, long type in terms of Richard Sherman, right? That's a comp, okay? But I just don't think that his measurables and things and his health is quite up to par for them to take that chance this high. And when you're really thinking about the NFL draft, you're thinking about, okay, generational prospects, best players in the draft. Pick them at the top of the draft, especially in a weaker class. So far, we've had the top quarterback go, the team that really desperately needs a quarterback in Cleveland and a quarterback contract go number 2. We've had the best overall athlete and player in the draft go number 3. We've had the best edge rusher and arguably the best player in the draft go number 4. At number 5, we had the best defensive tackle in the class for a team that doesn't need a number 1 receiver, doesn't really need a running back, doesn't need a quarterback. That went number 5. And then at number 6, okay, the Raiders, they just want really good football players. They want guys that are going to establish a new culture. And Ashton Jeanty feels like a game changer that they can add to Geno Smith in 2025 and get an immediate impact. So it does make sense to me. At number 7, we've got Jacksonville trying to slip back up, bro. Tyler Warren, and this is kind of staying on the same sort of trajectory of what I was talking about with the Raiders, is like, okay, let's just go down the list of who are the best players in the draft. And as much as I think the Jets should take Membu here, I think they really need a right tackle, and I think Membu would be the other good pick in this scenario. I think what the Jets have done this offseason lead us to believe that tight end is more likely just because they didn't re-sign Tyler Conklin. They do not have a legitimate tight end on the roster that can start in the NFL. Jeremy Ruckert is not that guy. He's a blocker at best. And you look at the weaponry of the Jets at wide receiver, and it's nothing special. So yeah, Justin Fields is more of a run-first type of quarterback, athlete-first type of quarterback. You're not going to be winning by throwing 30 to 40 times, but look at the Jets' new offensive coordinator. Look at what the Jets are, right? This is Aaron Glenn. Their new offensive coordinator is coming from Detroit. Detroit spent a pretty big pick on Sam Laporta, a multi-dimensional athlete at tight end. Tyler Warren is seen as a top 10 prospect without a doubt and probably top 7, top 5. he's a different dimension that you can add to this offense and bring some unique flavor, right? He can play in the slot, he can play in line, he can do a lot of different things, line up in the backfield, so you could be very creative with him. He can block, he's feisty enough to do that, and he's also very athletic as a receiver. So, and he's a dangerous open field threat to break tackles. He's a tough New York Jet football player that I think Aaron Glenn would covet as well. So, as much as I think right tackle is probably a little bit of a bigger need, I mean, weaponry is also a huge need for the next quarterback or for Justin Fields. You need to give Justin Fields a chance. You can't just give him Garrett Wilson and say, good day, have fun. Like, I mean, come on, give him a chance. So maybe they look at right tackle in the second round if they prefer it that way, right? Maybe they view Tyler Warren as just a can't miss player. So that's kind of the way I'm viewing it, is like, if a team really loves Tyler Warren and they're like, this guy's going to be good kind of no matter what, like we saw the Brock Bowers thing last year. This is the same thing where it's like Tyler Warren might not quite be Brock Bowers, but he's in the conversation for like a can't miss tight end prospect. At number 8, this is where it gets a little bit interesting because you're off the board of like, okay, these are the best players in the draft. And we're just going best player, best player, best player, best player, best player. You know, the Jets do need a tight end, but you know, the Raiders do need a running back, but those are the best players in the draft, period. Mike Green is a player that is, I think, kind of underrated right now in the process. I don't really understand why. He's one of the best pure pass rushers with bend and the skills to get to the quarterback that you're looking for. He put up ridiculous, ludicrous 3-cone times. I mean, some of his measurables are really incredible from that standpoint. And then his production is off the charts. I think he led all of college football in sacks. He was second in tackles for loss. So he has production. He has athleticism. Everything's standing out with Mike Green. And the Panthers, you know, they could go with a Jalen Walker, a hybrid linebacker DN that everybody is mocking to them, including myself. I wanted to be a little bit more unique and give them the guy that maybe has more pure pass rush upside, because that's truly what the Panthers need. They need a guy that can be like their former Brian Burns, like a 10-sack guy per year. They don't need some hybrid player that might help them as a pass rusher, but is he a tweener? Like, we don't really know. We need a guy that can win on the perimeter of our D-line. So, yeah, Mike Green feels like a great complement to what they already have on the defensive front. And then you've got pick number 9. I'm going to go Will Campbell here to switch it up. I went with Will Johnson last time because I felt like Brandon Staley needed a number 1 corner. And let's be fair, Isaac Yiadom is not going to be starting in the NFL in 2025. So the Saints do need a corner. A lot of people are mocking them an edge rusher, but I do believe that that's going to fade because Chase Young got paid a ton of money and they still got Cam Jordan. They still got Carl Granderson. So that's not an immediate need in my opinion. They spent a first-round pick on a defensive tackle not long ago, right? So left guard is their weaker position on the roster, left guard and corner, like I brought up. Those are the weakest positions. That's what should be addressed. And to me, the Saints had one of the worst offensive lines in football last year. So regardless of whether you think Will Campbell's a left tackle, okay, they can move Fuaga to the right side. They can move Fuaga to the guard spot. I mean, yeah, whatever they want to do there, right? So you just bring in 2 awesome players. And Fuaga and Campbell are kind of seen similarly, right? They were kind of seen similarly in terms of measurables, in terms of the hybrid nature of their game. They could play guard, they could play tackle. You know, Fuaga was kind of questioned in that regard as well. So there is some similarity. He's also from LSU, so they should have a good study of him being inside their state as well. And it just feels like it's a very good, safe pick for the Saints that they just desperately need good football players. They also need to start to establish their offensive line. What made the Saints so good for many years was the consistency of their offensive line up front. All the great names they had in the past, like Armstead and Ramczyk, right? And Evans and those guys that really made up their great offensive lines. And now it feels like, yeah, I like Fuaga. I like McCoy, but it feels like 3 of their spots are a little suspect, even Penning on the right side. So Campbell could be left tackle, he could be right tackle, he could be left guard, but either way, he's going to address something on the offensive front for the Saints. And then the 10th pick, I'm rolling with Shamar Stewart. This one to me is like, I didn't really know, could they go with Hampton here for a running back choice? Like I had them picking Genty on my previous mock draft to kind of complete the offensive weaponry around Caleb Williams. Is Hampton a little bit of a reach at this point? Maybe they could add a running back, in the 2nd or the 3rd round, something like that, right? So there's that. And then also the offensive line, I don't think they're really going to address because I think they're at least going to give Braxton Jones one more year. And Membu to me is a right tackle. So I don't think they would pick Membu because Darnell Wright is a right tackle and he's a good football player. So I don't think I'd be concerned about that. Also, wide receiver, I guess, could be maybe a possibility just because Keenan Allen is not on the team right now. But Rome Odunze, like, he was picked in the top 10, Tet McMillan or T-Mac. He's kind of a similar type of player, so I don't really see that as a fit, So I kind of felt like defensive line was the next place to go. Like establishing the line of scrimmage is what Ben Johnson and Poles want to do and want to be. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Is like, let's just double down on defensive front. Like, yeah, we brought in a decent defensive end from the Colts. We brought in Grady Jarrett, but that does not solidify a dominant defensive line for us. So let's double down. Let's bring in a freak athlete in Stewart. And the reason I went with Stewart over Mykel Williams or anyone else is because I think he most projects as the Cam Jordan-esque type of player for Dennis Allen. We already saw the type of player that they like to go after. This is the type of defensive end that Dennis Allen likes, right? He's very athletic. He could play inside, outside. He's got really good explosion, and he's just very athletic, very long, very big. Like, he's like 6'6", 280. So, yeah, he's a unique specimen. You can move him around. So, it's a hybrid piece that even if he doesn't start, you can kind of play around with where you can align him in year one and start to develop him as maybe more of a backup player. So, Shamar Stewart at number 10 makes sense for their type. That is my updated mock draft for the top 10 in 2025. If you enjoyed, spike the like button. 100 likes, and I'll come out with a 2-round mock draft. I'm really starting to dive into all these prospects now, and I'm going to be coming out with rankings for many positions on the channel, so make sure to check out those videos as well. Thanks for watching. It's Mitch. Peace.